Welcome back, Leggari Nation. On today's video, we're showing you an epic epoxy transformation on this 2,000 square foot home. We go over an existing epoxy surface because the epoxy that was there before did not hold up to industrial grade standards. Now with Leggari, these homeowners can rest knowing this epoxy will stand through time, giving their home the look they've been wanting. All of our kits have a lifetime warranty. Check the description below for more info and enjoy this video.
Okay, we want to show you how to measure out each section for your floor. This is about 2,000 square feet, so it's a decent sized floor. You can see it's a pretty hacked up floor. This is a repair. There was another company that attempted to do this floor, kind of botched it, so we're rescuing them. It's a local, some local guys that work at a corrections facility, so we like helping out local people. So we're using this opportunity to measure this out and make a video and show you how to do a project like this. So obviously the floor has already been prepped, so now we want to separate the rooms into the proper square footage. If you just take your primer and your epoxy and your top coat and you just mix them up and pour it out on the ground and start moving stuff around, it's never going to turn out nice. You always want to measure out section by section so you know how far a product should go. Our floor kit primers do 500 square feet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out for the primer. And it just so happens that our top coats are measured at the same rate. So I can use this tape on the walls that I'm going to measure out for my primer and my top coat. But the reason why you want to tape out sections is so that you know mentally, okay, this primer must go at least this far. And it forces you to make sure that you're stretching the product and putting it on thin enough where you're not going to run out of material by the end of the job. So the first thing we're going to do, and you can do this with a tape measure, these wheels are really easy, is I'm just gonna measure across the room. So this is 30 feet. So on this job, because it's about 2,000 square feet, we don't wanna mix 3-gallon kit batches. We want to mix 4.5-gallon kit batches so that we need less batches and we're not mixing so many times. So I'm going to mix 4.5-gallon kit batches, and at 45 square feet a gallon, this is where just some basic math comes into play. Now, if I'm going to mix 4.5 gallons at a time, I just take 4.5, and I times that by 45 because I want every one of those gallons to do 45 square feet. So I'm gonna do 4.5 gallons times 45, and that gives me 202. We're gonna round that. We'll say 200 square feet because that's very easy. So because this is 2,000 square feet, I'm going to mix 4.5-gallon kits. That means that my 4.5-gallon kits need to each go 200 square feet. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'll show you for the primer and the top coat at 500 square feet. But right now what I'll do is I'll actually mark all the sections for the epoxy because I'm gonna have a lot more of those sections. And sometimes it's easier to do the primer and the top coat sections once you've already put all your markings on the wall and your tape on the wall for the epoxy, because you can just measure out those sections easily because I know I need 500 square feet. So let's get into it. This is where you're gonna just watch my brain work and I'll explain everything that I'm thinking as I'm doing it. So this is 30 feet across. I need to measure out a 200 square foot section because a 4.5-gallon kit that I'm going to mix up will do 200 square feet. So just remember that. On this job, I'm not using 3-gallon kits. I'm doing 4.5-gallon kits. So 4.5 gallons should go 200 square feet because I want 45 square feet per gallon coverage rate. It's very important that you don't stretch the epoxy past 45 square feet. It looks the best, and we've tested everything the best at that coverage rate of 45 square feet a gallon. That's the thickness that our epoxy is kind of designed to go down at. So the way that you figure this out is I've measured across here and it's 30 feet across. I want to know where is 200 square feet at. So what you do is you take 200 and you divide it by the width of the area that you're measuring. So I'm going to take 200 square feet and I'm going to divide it by 30. That gives me 6.6. So now I need to take this measuring device, my wheel, and I need to measure this way, about 6.6 feet. So 6.6 feet is about right here at this door. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some blue painter's tape. You don't want to use the standard Scotch tape, the yellow stuff. It could rip off paint. And I'm just going to put a big line right here. And I'm going to go to the other side of the room. And I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm just going to look across the room and kind of see if that's correct. Now obviously there's plastic on this window. That's fine. We'll leave the plastic up. I'll even tape it up just so it doesn't fall down. So now, here's what I've done. I know that this is 200 square feet right here. And now there's this imaginary line on the floor, and so whoever comes and takes that 4.5 gallon batch of epoxy, they're gonna bring it out here and they're gonna dump it on the floor, and then Tyler's gonna make sure that when he spreads this epoxy, it does not go past this imaginary line. That's how you can determine, that's how you can make sure that your floor kit goes down at exactly the correct amount. You always want it to go down at 45 square feet a gallon. It's gonna self-level beautifully. It's gonna, if you have little pieces of debris that you left on the floor or specks of dust, it's going to flood right over those. It's gonna self-marbleize beautifully when it's at the proper coverage rate. So now I have my first section done, right? And this is 2,000 square feet. So I'm gonna have probably 10 sections, right? So, cause it's 2,000 divided by 200, it's about 10, I believe. So now I'm just gonna do the same thing. Here's where it gets a little bit trickier. And this is where you may have a pad, you may have a pencil. We do this quite a bit. So now that I've already done my first section, here's what I wanna do. I know that this is about to change and get longer. I still need to figure out where 200 square feet is. So what I'm going to do is I want to know the square footage of what's left in this little section. So I'm gonna measure from here to here, and it's 2 feet. And I know this is 30 feet across, right? So 30 times 2 is 60. I know that I have 60 feet left of square footage before my length changes. So what you do is you take 200, because that's each section that I'm trying to do, and I subtract 60 from this little area. So I have 140 square feet left, right? 140 square feet left. So now I'm just gonna pretend like I don't have to measure this section. So now instead of looking for 200 square feet, I'm actually in this section of the room now, the longer section, and now I'm looking for 140 square feet. So now, we do the same thing. We already know that this is 30 feet across, so I'm just gonna keep going. And that's 8 more feet. So this is 38 feet across. So now what I do, just like I did on the first section, is because I use 60 square feet here, we're gonna just subtract that from 200. So I have 140 square feet left. So I'm gonna take 140, and now I'm going to divide it by the width. 140 divided by 38. That's 3.7 feet. Let me grab this tape. So now what I'll do is I'll go here. About 3.7 feet. is right here. So now I have my next section pretty much done. Now, when I go to the other side of the room, obviously I don't have a mark. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to measure back to the wall. It's about 12.2 feet. All right, now you can really start to see this come together. So now I've got another 200 square foot section, and we're just gonna keep going. I'm gonna walk through this whole job on how to lay it out because it's very important, and it can seem confusing, but by the time you get done seeing me measure this out, I think you're gonna have an idea of how I'm doing it. And if you get a pad and pencil if you need to. So I got 200 square foot section here, I got another 200 square foot section here. And again, I wanna reiterate, it's because I'm going to make 4.5 gallons at a time. If you have a smaller project and you're only going to mix 3 gallons at a time, you only need 135 square foot sections. I'm doing 200 square foot sections. So now let's do it again. Let's just keep going. I'm looking for another 200 square feet. I know that the length from this wall to this wall is 38 feet. Okay, so I'm going to take 200, because that's how big of a section I need to mark off. 200 divided by 38, and I get 5.25, 5.25. So 5.25 is 5 foot 3 inches, because a quarter of 12 inches is 3. So now I'm going to measure off. That's my next section. And now I already know from this tape over here, I need to go 5 foot 3 inches again, 5.25 again. And guys, if you're measuring and you're getting close, don't stress out about the perfect inches. If you're getting close, this whole floor is gonna mold together and level together, and it's gonna turn out beautifully. So don't stress too hard about making sure every exact centimeter is perfect on this thing. Okay, so now that we have all of the tape on the wall for the epoxy batches, you want to tape off for primer and top coat, which all of those kits for the floors, we package them to do about 500 square feet, no matter what surface you're going over. Now, like I mentioned before, our primer on a smooth epoxy surface like this, it could do between 500 to 800 or more square feet. But for this job, we only have 4. So what we can't run the risk of is not going far enough. So we just need a reference on the wall. And the reason why I have you tape for the epoxy sections first is because you don't really need to measure out for your primer or your top coat then. I just measured out 200 square foot sections. That means if my primer and top coat will do 500 square feet, I just need 2.5 of these sections, right? So I have 200 square feet, 400 square feet, and this is 600 square feet. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go right in between with another piece of blue tape, and then I'm going to I'm using blue tape first because this tape right here, standard Scotch tape, this will rip paint off and rip finishes off of things. But I don't want to use the same colored tape for obvious reasons. You're just going to confuse yourself. So I put the blue tape down first, and then I tape right on top of that. You can even do a couple if you want, just so you can make sure you see the color. Boom. That's where my primer and my top coat need to go. Right there. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. So 1 section, 2 sections, 2.5 sections. I'm gonna go right in between. This is for my primer. And it's more for the guy who's rolling out the primer. It's more for the guy who's rolling out the primer, where he has this imaginary line and he knows I'm rolling I don't want to go past this until I know that I can cover this. I have 1, 2, 3, at least 3 batches of primer and top coat. This job calls for 4. We might tap into the other primer and the other top coat while we're trying to finish. But if you just need a little bit of primer and a little bit of top coat, don't be scared to mix up partial batches. Just read the instructions and look at the ratio. The primer is a 2-to-1 ratio. The top coat is a 3-to-1 ratio. So you don't need to mix it all up and waste your product. If you don't mix it up, you can save it for another project. But that's how you tape off for your primer and your top coat. Okay, I'm going to mix up 2 of the primer kits first. Again, this is a really smooth floor. It's a very sealed floor, so it may only take 2 kits to do this. We'll see. So I'm gonna mix up 2 of these. We'll pour the Part A. I'm gonna pour a little bit of the Part A out. I'm gonna put the lid back on and just shake it a bit, just in case there's anything settled, just to get it really agitated. I guess I'm not getting it agitated, I am agitating it, but you know. Shake this up first. Now, these say, shake Part B, make sure cap is secured. Mix Part A and Part B together. Once mixed, blend in 20 ounces of clean water. So each kit requires 20 ounces of clean water. And we have 2 things of water right here. Each have 20 ounces in it for each kit. You want to pour this slow because it'll kind of splash. Now this primer is a 2-to-1 ratio, so if you want to mix up smaller amounts, you can. But just remember, keep a 2-to-1 ratio with the primer, and then when you're wanting to add water to smaller amounts, it's just 10% water basically. So the Part B, we're gonna shake that up a little bit, pour that in. I'm gonna leave that lid off because we're actually going to pour the water into the Part B, just to get all of that pigment out that we can. We wanna make sure that this is a nice light gray color. I'm going to mix this with obviously an electric drill and a larger size paddle because I'm doing a 5-gallon bucket, so I'll leave this for when I'm doing smaller amounts. I'm just gonna mix this at a fairly low RPM for a couple minutes, and I'm gonna be scraping the sides and the bottom with the drill head, and then we'll add the water in a minute. All right, so that's mixed really well. Now I'm gonna pour 20 ounces of water into each of these Part Bs. I'll put the lid on, make sure that lid's pretty secure. That's where we're really gonna shake this really well to get all the pigment out. Now you can kind of see, you'll see how, see that light gray, it got a lot of pigment back out. So we're gonna mix this for another 30 to 45 seconds, blend in that water. Okay, now since this is a water-based product, you can actually clean this drill off very efficiently just with water. I'll finish cleaning this off. We'll get the primer to Tyler. This is ready to go. We might mix up another batch, maybe 2 batches, but we'll start with 2 just to see how far it goes.
We're going to go over how to install our WB primer. We're doing light gray, right, Tim? Yes, sir. Light gray. So we got our primer mixed up. Tim mixed that up for us. We got our 18-inch roller tray. Since this is a large floor, we're going to be using an 18-inch roller, and for our edges, we're going to be using a 9-inch. So these have already been de-shaded. If you're not familiar with that, you just take painter's tape run this out, or you can wrap it in the painter's tape and you can pull it off. That's going to remove any loose hairs out of this. You always want to be shed your roller. So.
Okay, I just want to walk you through the mixing station really quick. So obviously we have some really thick plastic down. This is where I'm going to mix. I have 9 of these buckets ready for 9 batches. And then I'm doing 4.5 gallon kits. So I actually need, right? So there's, if I take 3 of these kits, I can get 4.5 gallons for 1 kit and 4.5 gallons for 2 kits. So every 3 boxes is actually 2 kits. Right, so we have 2, 4, 6, 8. This is 8 batches, and then I have 2 more boxes there. That'll be, you know, I'll split one of those in half, so that'll be 9. The first thing I like to do is actually just open up all the boxes and just put the metallics with the boxes. Make sure you have enough. Now this has a silver base coat, and then for my highlights, that's actually over here because I need a lot less product. So what you'll actually do is you'll actually take half of one of your kits and you'll use it for your highlights over here. Now over here on the table, I've essentially done the same thing. But what's tricky about highlights is you have to determine ahead of time how much highlights am I going to give the person on the floor? And this is where you've got to just lay out a game plan ahead of time. It's very simple. And what we've decided is for every 2 buckets, which each bucket has 4.5 gallons, so for each 2 buckets, I'm going to give him 1 bucket of highlights. And this bucket and this bucket, we've determined I only want to give him about 32 ounces per 4.5 gallons. You could do anywhere from 24 to 32 ounces per bucket. For this look on the floor that we want to do, that's what we're going to do. So you'll be able to see how much highlight that is. You can always add less, you can always add more. When I'm mixing in the metallics, and you'll see in a minute, I will pull the bucket over, I will turn this vacuum on, and I'll put it right under here, and I will pour the metallics in here, and any residual dust will just get sucked into this shop vac. It's great. It's absolutely phenomenal to set it up like this. And when I'm mixing highlights, I will actually disconnect that hose and we have another hose set up, or you can do it all on the floor. Same thing for the table here. I'm going to be pouring in my metallic in this, and it's going to suck up all the residual metallics until I'm done mixing. Now, the beauty of the way we teach how to mix these floor kits is you do all the work up front before you start mixing so that you're not stressing out when you start mixing that first batch. The clock starts when you mix up your very first batch. But don't worry, I'm gonna make this so easy, it'll blow your mind. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dump out 2 gallons into all of these buckets. Because we're mixing 4.5 gallon kits, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every 2 parts A, we need 1 part B. So if I'm mixing a 4.5 gallon kit, it's 3 gallons of A and 1.5 gallon of B. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. So the first thing I'm gonna do, because it takes a little bit to get all of this epoxy dumped out of these containers, I'm just gonna get these part A's out of the buckets, and I'm gonna start dumping them in. And I'll just start in the middle here so you can kind of see. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna dump it, tip it upside down. I'm gonna put this 5 gallon stir stick through the top, Now you can be really careful doing this. I mean, we do this a lot, obviously, but I'm just gonna leave these hanging upside down. I'm gonna do that to all of these buckets. And I'm just gonna get this stuff draining into the buckets because it takes a little bit to drain. Okay, I'm gonna start tilting these up, letting some of it just drain out of the handle, and then tilt it back over. I have all of my 5-gallon stir sticks. Now, here's what's awesome. We have 9 5-gallon buckets with 2 gallons in each of the buckets. Now I'm gonna take the remainder of my Part A's and I'm gonna add 1 more gallon to each of these. Because again, we're doing 4.5 gallon kits. So I wanna add another gallon because I need 3 gallons of A and 1.5 gallons of B. I already have 2 gallons in all of these. I just need to add 1 more gallon to every one of these buckets. So when it starts dripping a little bit and the streams kind of disappear, that's what I'm looking for. So like that looks pretty good right there. All right, now I have all the Part A out of the containers. Now it just needs the B, it needs the hardener. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix in the metallic powder into the Part A. You're not mixing it in after you've mixed all the resin together. You're just going to mix this in with the Part A. Because one of these goes to a 3-gallon kit, which is 2 parts A to 1 part B, I'm mixing, remember, 4.5 gallon kits. So I actually need 1.5 of these in each bucket. So you can kind of eyeball that and I'll show you. I'm not going to talk a lot because I'm going to turn on the vacuum, but I'm going to move every container over by this vacuum while I'm mixing so I can mix in the metallics into the Part A. Once the metallics are mixed into the Part A, you can shut the vacuum off and this stuff won't get airborne. So you just got to mix it in and really kind of just immerse it in the epoxy. So I'm gonna have all of these quarts over here. Okay, quick lunch, little food coma going on with me, but now we're back in action. Now we want to mix in all of our metallics into the Part A, the 3 gallons of Part A. Now, keep in mind, I still have some epoxy up here for my highlights. I don't want to mix all of my base coat highlights in and then look around and think, well, oh shoot, I don't have any more epoxy left for my highlights. You must separate some epoxy for your highlights. Keep that in mind. So if I look at my base coat and I decide, all right, Tyler, for every 2 of these, I'm going to give you 1 of these to add your highlight. Then that means I'm gonna go 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, actually 4.5 highlights. And you can see up here, I have 5 containers set up, so I'm gonna do 2 quarts, 2 quarts, 2 quarts, 2 quarts, and then 1 quart. And it'll be a little more than 2 quarts, and I'll tell him you don't have to use it all. So let me show you how I would separate my highlights. Again, I'll take my hardener, I will set that aside. You don't wanna be pouring out any Part Bs right now. So I have my 2 gallons of A, and I want about 2 quarts. So now I have 48 ounces of A, 48 ounces of A, and then 24 ounces of A. what I like to do is separate my hardeners for these highlights, especially, you know, like on a table like this. I like mixing my highlights on a table with a hand drill and then a bigger paddle and an electric drill for my base coat. So it's just nice working up like this. So I'm now going to take the part B and I'm going to put half the amount, because remember, it's a 2-to-1. So if I have 48 ounces of A, I'm just gonna do 24 of B. But look how amazing this is. Look how easy and how much we're simplifying this process. My highlights are basically ready, except I still need to mix in my metallics. This kit is ready. I have my part A and my part B pre-measured. So when we're mixing, all I need to do is grab the hardener, put it in here, we're ready to go. Now we're going to mix in our metallics for everything, the base coats and the highlights. Now, this is the very first step, is just separating all your epoxy and getting a game plan together about how you're going to hand it to the person on the floor. And you're gonna see how fast we move on the floor because of how much preparation we have right here. The floor is basically done in the garage in a sense. And then I have my black metallics for these highlights right here. So I have silver down here and black up here. Read the labels on these metallics too. Now, let's start mixing all of the metallics in. What I'll do is I will start up here on the table and then I will move down here to the floor. Now you can do this outside as well. Maybe there's a little bit of a breeze. We like using the vacuum. It just takes all the residual metallics out of the air. So I'm gonna start this vacuum up so that we can get all the metallics mixed into the part A, and then we'll shut it off and I'll talk for a minute before we start on the floor. All right, so you can see how effective it is. It's awesome not having metallics in the air. Now again, this is a smaller batch, the last one I mixed. You wanna make sure you set that next to the correct hardener, right? This is the small batch that goes with this. The rest of them, they are ready to go. This is how your mixing station should be set up, guys. Just like this. Now we're going to do the same thing, just on a little bit larger scale, down here on the floor, mixing into the 3 gallons of part A. All right, so majority of the work pretty much done. So just like the highlights on the table, we're gonna set the hardeners next to these buckets because we wanna have a visual. We wanna set everything down and have a visual of what we're working with. We're ready to go. We're ready to go for the floor. And then we'll actually talk about how to mix.